Chapter 1. Security Trends. Computer security depends on the following: OCO confidentiality, OCO integrity, OCO availability. To understand security trends, you need to understand what these three terms actually mean in the context of your project, because you may interpret these three terms in a different way depending on the environment. The needs of individuals vary, and customs differ between countries. The Computer Emergency Readiness Team, CERT, was formed by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, in November 1988 because of a security breach issue. An unknown virus was detected by some Cornell University researchers. It spread to other universities, national laboratories, and other hosts on interconnected networks. A warning message took 26 hours to reach MIT from Harvard University. A request for comment, RFC, is a formal document from the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF. Interested parties may ask for it and review it. Some requests for comments are informational in nature. The next development was that from RFC 1636, the Internet Architecture Board, IAB, issued a report on security in 1994 titled OC Security in the Internet Architecture OCO. There was a consensus that the Internet should be more secure. The IAB identified a few key areas that were vulnerable. Security in the Internet Architecture Abstract. The report was presented at an Internet Architecture workshop, initiated by the IAB and held at the SC Information Sciences Institute in February 1994. This workshop generally focused on security issues in the Internet architecture. This document should be regarded as a set of working notes containing ideas about security that were developed by Internet experts in a broad spectrum of areas, including routing, mobility, real-time services, and provider requirements. It contains some significant diversity of opinions on some important issues. This report is offered as one input in the process of developing viable security mechanisms and procedures for the Internet. There were many suggestions about how best to tackle a modern monster: the security breach. The report states that the network infrastructure is one of the main points of vulnerabilities. One needs to control traffic, keeping a close watch on unauthorized monitoring. The user-to-user communications should also go through authentication and encryption mechanisms. The concern that the Internet needed more security was true. A number of security-related complaints started popping up at about that same time. If you look over a 10-year period, there were security-related vulnerabilities in the operating systems of the computers attached to the Internet, and at the same time, there were weaknesses in Internet routers and other network devices. The report showed one particular thing: authentication based on IP addresses was violated. Intruders created packets with false IP addresses and exploited the applications. As time goes by, the problem seemed to outpace the actual growth. This happens for one reason: hackers now depend more on automated attacks. So, the frequency of them has increased. Since most attacks are automated, they have become more sophisticated. The knowledge of the intruders might have declined, but the frequency of automated attacks has increased. The increased use of the Internet combined with the increase of the complexities of protocols and applications makes things more difficult to tackle. The CERT report shows the complexities are ever increasing. Nature and a perspective. Let us try to understand what confidentiality means. The literal meaning applies to the computer world also. It starts with the concealment of information. The information may be linked to particular protected resources. Consider sensitive fields such as government or industrial zones. In these industries you need to keep the information secret. In that sense, a military zone has a close relationship with industrial companies that want to keep their own strategies and design secret. The need to keep personal information secret is more important too. The recent debate over how to keep a user's personal data secure will continue for years to come. These aspects are interdependent. Confidentiality and integrity have a direct relationship with availability and accountability. As a matter of principle, confidentiality depends on integrity, and vice versa. Integrity ensures authorized modifications. It includes correctness and trustworthiness. It usually refers to data integrity and origin integrity. Data integrity refers to the content of the information, and the origin integrity is actually the source of the data, often called authentication. Several mechanisms support confidentiality, such as access control mechanisms. For example, cryptography runs on AOC lock and Kyoko algorithm. Cryptography scrambles data, and it makes the data not perceivable. You virtually lock the data, and after that, you have the cryptographic key to unlock that data. However, the need to lock the cryptographic key itself becomes a necessity after that. If you try to write that algorithm, you need to decide how deep you need to go. Basically, you have to handle two separate layers of data. Sometimes the mere fact that data exists needs to be protected. Think of two secrets associated with each other. For example, a social media company commercially uses a user's data without their permission. Here, the mere existence of such information needs to be concealed by the social media company by using access control mechanisms, because the existence itself may reveal more sensitive data. Resource hiding is another important aspect. A company doesn't want others to know their trade secrets, such as a formula, a specific strategy, or what equipment they have. Here authorization is important, which is not same as authentication. An access control mechanism can provide these capabilities, as the authorized users only can access classified data. However, there is a hidden difficulty or disadvantage. You need to assume that the system should give the proper supporting services so that all these mechanisms could be enforced. Therefore, there are two more layers of assumptions and trust. You need to trust all the authorized users. You will get a detailed explanation about this in Chapter 11, where I discuss the information assurance model. The advantage of system-dependent mechanisms over cryptographic is not foolproof. It can more completely protect data than cryptographic mechanisms, but the system-related controls could fail, or someone could bypass them to get access to the data. Working with integrity is not the same as working with confidentiality. In general, two classes: prevention mechanisms and detection mechanisms broadly define integration. In any case, if someone wants to make any unauthorized attempt to change the data, the prevention mechanism starts working. The unauthorized attempt may be classified into two broad categories. In the first case, the user is unauthorized, but he has bypassed the authentication and tries to change the data. In the second case, the user has authorization but he is not supposed to change the data. When a violation of integrity happens, the detection mechanism does not try to prevent it. Its job is reporting the fact. It reports that the data's integrity has been violated, and it has no longer trustworthiness. Confidentiality checks whether the data has been compromised or not. Integrity encompasses a wide range of responsibility. It first checks the origin of the data and how well the data was protected before it comes to The current machine. The next step is checking the current state where the data belongs. The evaluation of integrity is more difficult as it deals with the assumptions and trust at the same time. Confidentiality and integrity are directly related to availability and accountability. They constantly interact with the two components. Availability assures that authorized access to data and resources is always available. However, in the real world, something different may happen. You have probably heard of denial of service attacks. Someone may intentionally set up a trap that ensures the denial of service. In general, a statistical model works behind analyzing the expected patterns of a user echo's actions. There are a few parameters that may indirectly control that use, say, network traffic. Now, someone may be able to manipulate that whole system. In such cases, you will encounter a denial of service. The accountability ensures that the user echo's action is traceable. This trace route should be unique with respect to the user. When these four components work in harmony and the four objects meet all the criteria, you can say that the security is foolproof. Before and after the digital transformation, let echoes forget about the old concept of physical security where you might keep paper documents inside a locked container. The world is fast becoming paperless. In the past, people primarily kept information on paper. Lock and key were widely used to keep them secure. The safe transport of secret information was emphasized. 20 years ago, administrative security was mainly comprised of three main components: control access to materials, personal screening, and auditing. Information security today has completely changed. It starts with system complexities that are manifold. As the information becomes digital, the need to keep it secure becomes important. The system of maintaining security is getting complicated with the ubiquitous presence of automated attacks. The information security breaches have inflated financial losses, which have skyrocketed. As far as national defense is concerned, there are two main points where security should be tightened: the power grid and the air transportation. The interlinked digital system has made them vulnerable. Now, 20 years ago, the case was entirely contrasting. Think about the interlinked government agencies. The OSI security architecture. As a penetration tester or ethical hacker, a basic conception of open systems interconnection, OSI, security architecture is necessary because hacking is all about interconnected networks. In the coming chapters, where you will learn Kali Linux tools, I will refer to this standard often. OSI is related to the standards developed by the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, Telecommunication Standardization Sector, ITUT. The United Nations sponsors the ITU agency, which develops security standards. First, you need to understand why OSI security architecture is important. It organizes the task of providing security. It was developed as an international standard. For that reason, companies related to computer manufacturers and communication vendors now maintain that standard. They have developed security features according to that standard, and now they maintain it strictly. The OSI security architecture has some guidelines and structured definitions of services and mechanisms. The ITUT recommendation X.800 is the OSI security architecture. It defines an organized approach. X.800 is an extension of recommendation X.200 that originally described the OSI security architecture reference model. As far as the system interconnection is concerned, the act of working together in an Efficient and organized way is important. In other words, existing and future recommendations should communicate with each other. The OSI security architectural mechanism establishes a framework for such coordination. In the OSI reference model, there are 7 layers. Each layer is generally called an N layer. Usually, the N+1 entity asks for the transmission services to the N entity. It is a kind of linear algorithm on which the objective of the OSI reference model is based. It permits the interconnection of disparate computer systems so that communication between application processes may be achieved. You'll learn more about this in Chapter 4. There is every possibility that when information is exchanged between applications, it could be hijacked. To protect against that, security controls need to be built. However, there is a glitch. In the end, sometimes it turns out that the value of the information is less than the effort to build those controls to obtain data. However, one needs to follow the recommendation because it defines the general security-related architectural elements, and the communication between open system codependent applications should remain secure. To allow secure communication, you need guidelines. The OSI security reference model guides you to improve the existing recommendations. Let us try to understand the OSI security reference model in detail. As mentioned, it is composed of 7 layers. Let us imagine someone is in charge of each particular layer. Conceptually, each host has a person in charge at each layer who will communicate with a peer on other hosts. It always maintains the same layer principle that tells us one key thing in general. The person in charge at layers 1, 2, and 3 will communicate only with the similar person in charge at the connecting hosts. At the other end of communication, the person in charge at layers 4, 5, 6, and 7 waits to receive communication from the person in charge at layers 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the connected hosts. This provides the abstract representation of networks suitable for secure communication. Let us suppose there are 3 hosts in the neighborhood called A, B, and C. A, the starting point, wants to communicate with C, however, B is in between. In such cases, A will first determine who is the nearest host. Here B is the nearest. Using the appropriate routing protocol, A forwards the messages to B, and next, B determines who is the nearest host. If there was another host named D that was between B and C, then B would pass the messages to D, and the process would continue until C, the endpoint, gets the messages. Let us see a mathematical representation of the same abstract. Let there be n number of hosts. The constant C starts from 0 and extends to n. 2 devices, I and I+1, are directly connected. In such case, 0 on IN. When a communication protocol is established, you can suppose that the 2 endpoints will be 0 and n. You can call this an end-to-end protocol. The 2 connected applications, that is, I and I+1, have a communication protocol between them, which is called a link protocol. There is a world of difference between an end-to-end protocol and a link protocol as far as the security threats are concerned. Telnet is an ideal candidate for an end-to-end protocol where the intermediate parts play no part. IP is an ideal candidate for a link protocol, where the messages move from the host to the immediately available neighbor, and the process continues until the messages reach the recipient. An end-to-end protocol has other features also. In an end-to-end protocol, the cryptographic processing is done only at the source end. at the endpoint or destination. In a link protocol, the cryptographic processing is done at each spot along the path. Suppose there are 4 hosts, called A, B, C, and D. Each host gets the encrypted message, and the PPP encryption protocol enciphers the message. This is called link encryption. Each host shares the cryptographic key with its neighbor. These keys may be set in 2 ways, either a per host basis or a per host pair basis. For A, B, C, and D, let consider the first basis, per host key. Each host has its own key and 3 for the others. Therefore, there are 4 keys. In the second scenario, per host pair basis, there are 6 possible well-defined and finite sets, as shown here. A, B, A, C, A, D, B, C, B, D, and C, D. Since each host has 1 key per possible connection, it has 6 keys altogether. In the Python programming language, you can have a representation of the set as a list within a list, with each list having 1 possible key. Later you will see how this cryptographic mechanism helps in defending against attacks and other security threats. Security attacks, services, and mechanisms. There are 2 types of attacks, passive and active. A passive attack might make an attempted effort to learn information and make use of that information to learn even more about the system, but it does not affect the system. You have probably heard of reconnaissance. This is a passive attack. An active attack is directed toward the system to alter the system resources and operations. In most cases, security breaches start with reconnaissance. Since it takes more time to gather information than a directed attack, reconnaissance, also called footprinting, covers almost 90% of the hacking activity. You may compare this to a war strategy. Before any war takes place, army generals sit down and listen to every minute detail about the enemy's strength and weaknesses, such as the location, the vulnerable strategic points, the possible backup strength, and more. These processes of collecting the information are also called information gathering. Before any attack, the more information you gather, the greater your chance of success. Why? Because you will learn about your enemy's strength, and if you feel that this is not the right moment to proceed, you can defer the operation for the time being. Any attack involves a risk of losing the war. In the hacking world, the same concept applies when someone plans to attack system resources. Gathering information is important in that sense. In the real world, there are spies, informers, and other techniques involved that gather as much information as possible. When someone tries to communicate between 2 open systems, the protocol layer provides some services that are defined as security services to ensure the adequate security of the systems, system-dependent applications, and data transfers. These services can be divided into 5 broad categories: authentication, access control, data confidentiality, data integrity, and non-repudiation. You have already gained some insights about the first 4 categories. Non-repudiation talks about the specifications of the source and the origin. It checks the messages sent by the specific party and received by the specific party. It also provides protection against any kind of denial by one of the entities. You will get more details about this in Chapter 11. What does availability of services mean? Both X.800 and RFC 2828 define it as a property of a system or of system-dependent resources that could be accessible and usable on demand by the authorized entities. The process leading to a loss or reduction in availability, may trigger a variety of attacks. Authentication and encryption are some automated courses of action. Sometimes, we require some sort of physical actions too. An attacker often relies on a trace route. A trace route is the act of tracing the route of the link protocol echo's journey, that is, how IP addresses change in the course of movement. The web depends on one principal concept: request and response. When someone requests a web page, the browser goes through many networks and finally pops up as a dead HTML page. There could be a packet filtering router or a firewall there. You may find many more surprising things in the journey of link protocols. If you find any IP address that is different from those allocated to the target, it could be the end router. There are many more techniques that help you to learn which machine is running and which is not. There are ping sweeps, port scanning, fingerprinting, footprinting, and many more. These are more or less the same in purpose but different in approach and characteristics. Echo pinging is done by issuing an echo command. If the machine is on, IDA call answer. The procedure is not as easy as this, though. IDACO's kind of like sending a request to a remote machine to check whether IDACO's responding. It uses an end-to-end protocol. You can send one request at one time. If you want to send multiple pings, then you must get help from a tool such as hoping or fping. In such cases, the technique used is called a ping sweep. Scanning port 80 is much easier because most firewalls allow packets to pass through that port if that network hosts a web server. This is called TCP scanning. Echo fingerprinting is gaining knowledge about the target Echo's operating system. IDACO's usually done by gaining information such as the banner, services, ports, and OS used on the target system. I'll discuss it in detail in Chapter 10. Echo map does plenty for us such as identifying services and port scanning and much more. Map even saves the output in a human-readable format. The most commonly used ports are SSH, FTP, SMTP, NetBIOS, HTTP, and many more. Echo footprinting is another important method to collect information. IDACO's usually done by using tools such as domain lookup, HOI, ANS lookup, and spam spade. By footprinting the target, a hacker can make decisions earlier. A hacker can eliminate the tools at the beginning that will not work against the target. The main goal of reconnaissance is to collect passive information before launching the actual attack. With the help of a passive attack, you can decide which tool will be more effective and which will not work at all. In a link protocol, attackers who are monitoring the whole network medium will not be able to read the messages passed in on a per host basis, but attackers of the intermediate hosts will be able to do so. As you have learned already, in end-to-end encryption, each host shares a cryptographic key with each destination. For that reason, neither attackers monitoring the network nor attackers on the intermediate hosts can read the message. However, the routing information is useful here. It is used to forward the message. These differences give you a chance to create a form of cryptanalysis known as traffic analysis. Here the messages are not important. The information about the sender and the recipient is crucial. Several security mechanisms have been defined by X.800. Sometimes they are specific to certain protocols, but most of the time they are not specific to any particular protocol or services. Let us see some of the specific security mechanisms. These mechanisms are applied to protect the system from both active and passive attackers. One of them is notarization. You have probably seen lots of examples of this in your life. You use third-party software to prove that the signing party is not a robot. Traffic padding is a technique where bits are inserted into the gaps in the data stream so that passive attackers get frustrated. By means of exchanging some specific information, you can assure that the identity of an entity is genuine. This is called authentication. Exchange. In addition, routing control is a complex mechanism that involves routing changes when breaches of security are suspected. You have already learned about data integrity and access control. In addition, there are specific security mechanisms like digital signature and encipherment. A digital signature is a cryptographic transformation that defends against forgery. Encipherment is based on a mathematical algorithm that enables a digital transformation that is not readily comprehensible. The request and response processes depends on the cryptic algorithm. There are security mechanisms that are not so specific to OSI security services or protocols. The security label, audit trail, and recovery are part of that mechanism where mainly recovery actions take place. In such mechanisms, the security attributes of the resource are mentioned. Another feature is trusted functionality, which checks some criteria, such as some criteria established by a security policy. This mechanism also includes the detection of security-related events. Timeline of a hacking. Before jumping to the interesting topic of Google hacking, you will see a list of attacks that has spanned more than 20 years. As I have said, with the passage of time, the knowledge for hacking has been replaced by the automated services, and the nature of the attacks is now more difficult and full of complexities. The list starts from 1990 and moves toward the present time. I roughly assume the starting point base to be the CERT report. At that time, automated services were not available on such a large scale. So, a high amount of knowledge was the key factor then. OCO Internet social engineering, packet spoofing, sniffers, and session hijacking were rampant in the first half of the 1990s. In the middle of the 1990s, we came to know about automated probes and scans. Graphical user interface hacking tools started appearing. Automated widespread attacks like denial of service, DOS, attacks came out and were reported from every part of the world. Browsers were targeted by executable code attacks. Widespread attacks on DNS infrastructure were first reported in 1997, and at the same time to distribute such malicious attacks, hackers used the Network News Transfer Protocol, NNTP. OCO. Toward the end of the 1990s, automated hacking tools started appearing on a large scale. We saw more and more Windows-based remote controllable Trojans, and wide-scale Trojan horse distribution increased. Distributed DOS attacks were rampant. Home users were targeted by automated robots. Anti-forensic techniques became available, and use of malicious worms increased. OCO. By the end of 2000, sophisticated commands and controls were seen and reported. Studying the complexities of attacks, you can conclude that the job of computer security requires more skill and an eye for detail now. How to use Google hacking techniques. How do hackers use Google for reconnaissance? They use Google hacking, which sometimes produces a lot of information. In the coming chapters, you will see how popular hacking tools use the same concepts to gather information before exploiting a victim machine. Though it seems trivial at first glance, hackers generally use search engines to collect a huge amount of information about the target before Launching any direct attack. Refining web searches can be made easy with the help of a Google search. You can use symbols or words in your search to make your search results more precise. If you visit www.google.com/help/refinezarch.html, you'll find a few good tips. When you use these techniques, please remember that a Google search usually takes no notice of punctuation that is no part of a search operator, so it goes better to omit the punctuation at the beginning. Also, you must not include spaces between the symbols or words and your search terms. For example, you'll want to use site xyz.com and not site xyz.com. There are many common search techniques that you can use with a Google search to gather passive information about your target. Suppose you want to search social media about a person or organization. In that case, you can place an @ sign in front of a word to search. If you want to get information about Sanjeev Sinha on social media, for example, then just type @Sanjeev Sinha. Before buying an item, you may want to search for the price. In that case, just put a $, sign in front of a number. If you want to buy a TV, just type TV $100. For social media, hashtags are a popular way to find your favorite words that are trending currently. In a Google search, you may write the word like this, #word. Making your search more specific is a real challenge. To do that, you may need to omit a few words. There are lots of words that are similar to each other, and it goes impossible for a Google algorithm to make a differentiation between them. Suppose you want to know the speed of a tiger, there might be a brand of car that is also called Tiger. In such cases, Google returns all the relevant measurements such as the speed of the animal and the speed of the car. If you don't want the speed of car, then you can place a hyphen before the word car. So, the search phrase will look like this, Tiger speed Oko car. You may want to search for an exact match of any word like Sanjeev Sinha hacking. In that case, your search must be double quoted, OC Sanjeev Sinha hacking Gako. You may want to search wildcards of an unknown word with a star, asterisk. Like this, Sanjeev Sinha asterisk hacking books. Sometimes searching within a range of numbers is necessary. Suppose you're looking for a mobile phone within a price range of $50 and $100. In that case, you may narrow down your hunt this way, mobile $50 $100. Using two dots like this will help you to find mobile prices ranging from $50 to $100. Combining searches is another option where you may want to compare two closely related words like computer and hard drive. 2. Narrow down your search, write or between these two words, computer or hard drive. By now you probably know that extensions are generally used for domain specifications. For example, .gov usually stands for government sites. In such cases, simply put site before a site or domain like this, site xyz.com or site.gov. There are other sites that are related to one specific site, and you may need to get results about them also. In such cases, you can use the term related. Write related xyz.com. Other sites associated with xyz.com will automatically fall prey to your hunting spree. Want more information and to go deep into the details of any site? Just put info in front of the site address like this, info.xyz.com. Usually, Google keeps the cached version of many sites that do not exist anymore. You may want to check whether such cached versions exist. Put cache before the site address, as in cachexyz.com. You can also try these: Integral Administration PHP, File Typing, and in text MySQL_. Connect. Further reading. Gallman, DOC Computer Security OCO. Schneier, BOC Secrets and Lies, Digital Security in a Networked World OCO. Flager, COC Security in Computing OCO. Registered Sanjeev Sinha 2018. S. Sinha, Beginning Ethical Hacking with Kali Linux. https://doi.org/1007/978-1-4842-38912-2. Chapter 2. Setting up a penetration, testing and network security lab. When you're going to be doing penetration testing or hacking related testing, it is necessary to build a lab because you cannot experiment on a live system. Therefore, you need a virtual environment, also known as a hypervisor. For Linux users, VirtualBox is a great solution. KVM is also good. For Windows, VMware Player is a good solution. Windows Virtual PC is also good, but you cannot run Linux distributions in it. For Mac OS, both QEMU and Parallels are good options. For beginners, I suggest sticking to either VirtualBox or VMware. They are both simple to install and run. In this chapter, I'll show how to install VirtualBox and VMware and set up your virtual environment. 20. Why virtualization? You may be wondering whether you need virtualization at all. Yes, you do need it, and for several reasons. The most important reason is that you have to stay within the law. You must practice your hacking related skills in a legal way. Therefore, you should run all your tests virtually, in an artificially built environment, without compromising or attacking any live system. When you perform ethical hacking, you have no intention to break the law. The second reason you need a virtual environment is so you can provide protection to your own system against any malicious attacks. With a hypervisor, you can safely browse the internet without being worried that some malicious software might enter your main operating system. The third reason is that in a virtual box, you can play with the virtual operating system without any fear of messing it up or even breaking it. See Figure A21. There is every possibility that while testing a hacking tool, you will break the virtual operating system. Figure 2:1. Kali Linux and Windows 10 running in VirtualBox. I encourage you to do every type of testing. When you have a virtual machine, you can test everything that comes to your mind. Note, you should not jeopardize any other system. Stay within the law, use VirtualBox or VMware. Don't try to experiment on any live system. Installing VirtualBox. VirtualBox is a hypervisor that can run many guest operating systems inside it so that you can experiment with your hacking tools. It is useful because you can practice without any fear of breaking the law. VirtualBox can bring with it a massive change in your attitude toward your computer. While using it, you can have every confidence that whenever you are inside VirtualBox, your main operating system is not affected. The host OS and the guest operating systems can still communicate with each other, and the guest operating systems also can communicate between them. VirtualBox contains a dynamic recompiler based on QEMU technology, which helps to achieve this goal. Installing VirtualBox is simple. Whatever your operating system is, the process just requires a few clicks or a few commands. If you are using Windows, go to the Oracle VirtualBox web page and download the latest version available. The setup process will guide you through the virtualization. Windows users also can download VMware Player and install it. You will learn how to install VMware Player in Windows later in this chapter. The difference between VirtualBox and VMware Player is subtle. Both are virtual machines and run on the top of your existing